We all like to believe that hard work pays off, that loyalty is rewarded, that in the quiet corridors of corporate life or the familiar streets of our hometowns, there's a certain order of fairness to things, but sometimes that belief is shattered. Sometimes the person you trust, the system you serve, turns on you with a coldness that chills you to the bone. Tonight, we delve into a story of betrayal so profound and a quest for justice so meticulous. It serves as a stark reminder. Sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is to patiently, strategically, and silently dismantle the world of those who tried to break you. This is the story of how one man, pushed to the brink, turned the tables on a tyrant, not with a roar, but with a whisper that brought an empire crashing down. It's funny how quickly your world can tilt on its axis. One day you're respected, you're on a clear path, doing good work, feeling secure. The next, a shadow falls, and everything you've built feels like it's standing on quicksand. For me, that shadow had a name, though in my mind, and for the purpose of this story, we'll call him Stalin. It's a harsh moniker, I know, but believe me, by the time you hear what I endured, you might think it's too kind. I was working for a major wholesale company, a big player in Belgium, second in command at a pretty substantial branch. I'd been there a good while, climbed the ladder steadily, always got on with my superiors. I wasn't just clocking in and out. I cared about the place, the people, the work. The future looked bright. I was, by all accounts, on track to become a branch manager myself. It felt earned, it felt right. Then, like a sudden, unwelcome weather front, my old manager, a decent guy, got promoted to headquarters. Good for him. For us, not so much, because his replacement was Stalin. He was a few years older than me, maybe early 40s, and he strode in on day one with the kind of bluster that immediately sets your teeth on edge. He gathered the team, puffed out his chest, and announced he was the man to lead us to unprecedented glory. We would be the most successful branch, he declared, because he, Stalin, was a winner and only surrounds himself with other winners. He even had the audacity to say he was deaf to the word can't. We all exchanged those knowing glances, the kind that say, oh boy, here we go. We just didn't know how far here would actually go. It took less than a week for the cracks in his winner facade to show. The man knew next to nothing about our products, our clients, or the actual nuts and bolts of the business. And as for leading a team, his idea of management was to delegate, or rather abdicate, his responsibilities mostly onto my already full plate. Suddenly, my full-time job became 2 full-time jobs. Orders would be barked, tasks would be dumped on my desk with a dismissive wave, and never, not once, was there a thank you or a good job. I was drowning, trying to keep my head above water and do his work on top of my own, while he apparently was busy cultivating his image as a visionary leader. You'd think that would be the worst of it, right? A lazy, incompetent boss who takes all the credit. If only. One afternoon, my office phone rang. The caller, his French atrocious for someone claiming to be an important manager, introduced himself as being from our biggest competitor. He was cagey, but the gist was clear. He was offering me a lucrative position if I'd be willing to spill some company secrets, maybe poach a few key clients. The whole thing felt off. It was too blatant, too amateurish. I politely declined, of course, a little unnerved, but mostly just wanting to get back to the mountain of work Stalin had left me. An hour later, I was summoned. "Close the door," Stalin said, his eyes glinting with something I couldn't quite place. He then proceeded to inform me that he had made that call. He was testing my loyalty, testing me. While I was single-handedly keeping his department from imploding due to his negligence, he was spending his precious time concocting these juvenile, insulting loyalty tests. He even had the gall to say, "And I will continue to test you from time to time." I just stared at him, a cold knot forming in my stomach. This wasn't just incompetence. This was a different level of manipulative arrogance. It felt like something out of a bad sitcom, but the laugh track was silent. replaced by a growing sense of dread. The weeks that followed were a masterclass in mismanagement and petty tyranny. Stalin did progressively less work. I'd walk into his office needing urgent approval on something, only to find him engrossed in the newspaper, or worse, playing online poker. He didn't even try to hide it. Why should he? He was, in his own mind, untouchable. When sales targets were missed, despite the Herculean efforts of the rest of us, he'd call an all-hands meeting and unleash a torrent of abuse. He expected results, he'd bellow, or heads would roll. To set an example, he fired a couple of newer staff, good people on short-term contracts, easy targets. He didn't replace them, of course. Cutting costs, he called it. So now we were all working 40-plus hours on 35-hour contracts just to stay afloat. Well, almost all of us. There was one department head, a young woman we'll call Naive Girl. She was a bit spacey. She managed a small but crucial department, and every Friday, like clockwork, she'd be gone by noon. Stalin, too, had his own peculiar schedule. Tuesdays, he'd vanish by 2 p.m., his sacred Thai massage and spa time, apparently. Thursdays, he'd drag himself in late, reeking faintly of stale beer from his Wednesday night soccer coaching and subsequent team bonding at the bar. And Fridays, he was also gone by midday, off to important meetings with the board and the big boss at headquarters in Brussels. He'd claim with a self-important air, "I knew it was bull." My previous managers never had such rigorous weekly demands from HQ. His and Naive Girl's synchronized Friday departures. Well, a pattern was starting to emerge. A faint, ugly stain I wasn't ready to examine too closely, not yet. He also seemed to derive a perverse pleasure from singling out individuals, especially younger female employees, dragging them into his office for ritualistic dressing downs, threatening their jobs if they didn't improve. It was psychological warfare designed to keep everyone off balance and terrified. Yet, somehow, through sheer grit and teamwork, we managed to hit our targets for a few months. It helped that a local competitor had recently gone belly up, but still, our branch was performing exceptionally well compared to others. Then came the New Year's reception, company tradition, all the top brass, branch managers, their seconds in command. And there on stage was Stalin being handed the Manager of the Year award by the overall head of the company, the owner, a man we'll call Big Boss. Instead of thanking his team, the people who were actually doing the work, Stalin launched into a sickening paean to himself. He thanked Big Boss for his faith, made a brief saccharine mention of his pregnant wife, and then proceeded to extol his own virtues as a manager, his business acumen, his ability to get the best out of people. I swear I nearly threw up in my champagne flute. The applause was deafening. This was his moment, and he soaked it in like a Roman emperor. The next day, that cheap metal trophy was displayed on a specially placed pedestal in his office, a monument to his ego. He was like a villainous, unfunny version of Steve Carell from The Office, his ego so vast it could have its own gravitational pull. The injustice of it all burned in my chest, a slow, simmering fire. I didn't know it then, but that fire was about to be fueled. There's a peculiar kind of suffocation that comes with working under a man like Stalin. It's not just the workload or the verbal abuse, it's the slow erosion of your spirit, the constant gnawing awareness that you're trapped in a system that rewards the undeserving and punishes the diligent. Every day felt like pushing a boulder uphill, only to have Stalin kick it back down with a sneer. The Manager of the Year award was a turning point for me. Seeing him bask in that unearned glory, knowing the truth of his ineptitude and our collective exhaustion, it solidified a cold resentment that settled deep in my gut. But the true extent of his depravity, the sheer gall of the man, was yet to be fully revealed. I was working late one evening, a common occurrence, catching up on the tasks Stalin had conveniently forgotten. Out of the corner of my eye, I glanced at the security monitor covering the parking lot, and there they were, Stalin and Naive Girl, kissing. Not a friendly peck, but a lingering, clandestine embrace. My blood ran cold. Naive Girl, the one who left early every Friday, just like him. Naive Girl, who my own girlfriend knew from high school and university, a small, almost insignificant detail at the time, but one that would later prove crucial. And Stalin, who had just weeks before on that damn stage thanked his pregnant wife. The hypocrisy was staggering. This wasn't just a bad boss. This was a man devoid of any moral compass. Just when I thought he couldn't sink any lower, he found a new Mariana Trench of sleaze. His pettiness knew no bounds, especially when it came to something as simple as vacation days. He wielded his authority over our time off like a capricious god, delighting in the power to grant or deny. The first year he was manager, I'd requested a week off in October, putting in the request way back in April. I was planning a trip to Greece with my girlfriend and her family. He sat on the request for months, then finally, grudgingly, approved it just 2 weeks before the planned departure. By then it was too late. My girlfriend's family, unsure if I'd get the time off, had postponed their plans. My girlfriend and her father hadn't even bothered applying for leave. Stalin hadn't just screwed me over. He'd messed with my girlfriend, my in-laws, all it seemed to flex his managerial muscle, to remind me who was in charge. That trip to Athens, a dream for my Greek-Belgian girlfriend and a much-needed break for me, evaporated because of his ego. The man's ego was so inflated, it was a wonder it didn't require its own zip code. I hated him, truly, deeply hated him. The following year, I was determined not to be caught out. I knew his game. I requested my vacation time well in advance. And, predictably, Stalin denied it. His excuse? An upcoming inventory, something I wasn't even directly involved with. But I had a counter strategy this time, or so I thought. I knew he needed me. I was doing his job on top of mine. The paperwork, the numbers, the accounting, basically anything that required actual effort or brain power, he couldn't afford to lose me, not really. So I decided to fight fire with fire, to use one of his own underhanded tactics. I disguised my voice, put on a different accent, and called him, pretending to be a manager from a rival company. I told him I'd received a resume from Mark, that's me of course, and was calling for a reference. My plan was simple. Let him think I was actively looking for another job. The fear of having to actually do his own work, I reasoned, would surely make him approve my vacation to keep me sweet. His reaction was both predictable and appalling. He put on his important man voice and proceeded to systematically trash me as an employee. Unreliable, he said. Always late, a blatant lie. Sloppy with details, forgetful, he painted a picture of such incompetence that no one in their right mind would hire me. The sheer audacity. He was actively sabotaging my chances of escape, all to keep his unwilling workhorse tethered. What a vile, contemptible excuse for a human being. But a small victory. The scare tactic worked, partially. The next day, my vacation request was magically approved. He never mentioned the call, never confronted me about supposedly looking for other jobs. I booked everything, flights, hotels. Greece was back on. My girlfriend and her family were thrilled. I could almost taste the souvlaki. Then, the rug was pulled out from under me again. 1 month before departure, he called me into his office. A smug little smile played on his lips. He had to go on an important business meeting in Prague, he announced. And since one of us had to be at the branch, my vacation was regrettably canceled. Again, I was momentarily speechless, the injustice of it, like a physical blow. But a spark of something ignited within me. I needed proof. My girlfriend will not be amused, I said, trying to keep my voice even. Could you put that in an email so I can show her it's official? He chuckled, the sound grating on my nerves, and agreed. The email landed in my inbox moments later, confirming my holiday was canceled due to his urgent business trip to Prague. The fool. He actually thought it was just to appease my girlfriend. He had no idea he was handing me a piece of the puzzle. I was slowly, unknowingly starting to assemble. This was the final straw. I'd heard whispers, murmurs through the company grapevine that he'd been blocking my internal promotions, branding me as incompetent to anyone at headquarters who might consider me for a more senior role. He wanted me stuck right where I was, doing his dirty work. He was actively derailing my career, both within the company and outside it. I felt like his serf, bound to his petty whims, with no clear path to escape. I was desperate. The walls were closing in. And then, just when the despair was threatening to consume me, Lady Luck, in a most unexpected guise, decided to pay a visit. The week I was supposed to be in Greece, Stalin was supposedly in Prague. My girlfriend, however, did go to Athens with her family. One evening, my phone buzzed. It was her voice tight with a strange excitement. "You need to see this," she said, and a moment later, screenshots landed in my WhatsApp. They were from Facebook, Naive Girl's profile. And there they were, Naive Girl and Stalin, arm in arm, beaming against a backdrop of snow-capped mountains. In Switzerland, skiing. There was no business trip to Prague. He'd lied. He'd canceled my much-needed, twice-planned vacation, not for work, but for a sordid alpine getaway with his mistress, cheating on his pregnant wife. The sheer, unadulterated bastardry of it all hit me with the force of a physical shock. But amidst the rage, a cold, clear thought began to form. He hadn't expected us to see these pictures. He had no idea my girlfriend and Naive Girl were even tenuous Facebook friends, ghosts from a shared past. He thought he was invincible, he was wrong. This wasn't just a personal grievance anymore. This was evidence, this was leverage. This, I realized with a grim certainty, was the beginning of his end. The sight of those Facebook photos, Stalin and Naive Girl frolicking in the Swiss Alps while I was stuck covering his tracks, was like a shot of adrenaline to my weary soul. The anger was still there, a burning coal in my chest, but now it was mixed with something else. Focus. This wasn't just about him being a terrible boss anymore. This was about deceit on a grand scale, affecting not just me, but his wife, his family, the company itself. My mind raced. The pieces were scattered, but a picture was beginning to form. Just a couple of weeks prior, at a company networking event, lubricated by a few too many beers, I'll admit, I'd found myself chatting with another branch manager, an equal to Stalin. I'd let slip my dislike for the man, and to my surprise, this manager shared the sentiment. And then he dropped a bombshell. Stalin had only landed his cushy job because his wife, Cinderella, as we'll call her, a fitting name for someone unknowingly living a lie, was the daughter of Big Boss, the owner of the entire company. Click, everything snapped into place. His incompetence, his arrogance, his untouchable demeanor. He wasn't just any manager, he was the son-in-law. He was being groomed, and he was cheating on Big Boss's pregnant daughter. The audacity was breathtaking. The universe, it seemed, was finally handing me the cards. And those Facebook photos, they weren't just pictures, they were proof, hard, irrefutable proof. My girlfriend was in Athens, Stalin was gallivanting in Switzerland, and I was back at the understaffed branch holding the fort. It was the perfect opportunity. I drafted an email addressed to all branch managers, CCing Big Boss, who rarely, if ever, responded to such general communications. I explained that we were struggling, needing extra help, and that I couldn't reach my own manager, Stalin, as he was on an important business trip and had asked not to be disturbed. I knew Stalin had officially requested holiday leave from Big Boss for his Swiss rendezvous. The business trip was the lie he'd told me, the lie immortalized in that email he'd so foolishly sent. I was deliberately creating a contradiction, a small crack in his story, hoping Big Boss would notice. He noticed. Almost immediately, my inbox pinged, a reply from Big Boss himself. He informed me that Stalin was, in fact, on holiday, visiting an old school friend in Switzerland, and that he would authorize the backup I needed. This was it. I had a direct line. I replied innocently, "Oh, that's strange. He told us it was a business trip. That's why he had to cancel my approved vacation." And then the crucial move. I forwarded him Stalin's email to me, the one explicitly stating his trip to Prague was for business. "Here's the email he sent me," I added. Big Boss's reply was swift. "I will talk to him about this. That's odd. Maybe he wasn't paying attention. I will call him this afternoon and sort this out. Thank you, and keep up the good work." The next day, my phone rang. It was Stalin calling from Switzerland, and he was incandescent with rage. Big Boss had indeed called him, catching him completely off guard. And Stalin, as I was learning, did not like surprises. I had a feeling this might get ugly, so on a hunch, I hit record on my phone. What followed was a torrent of abuse, a volcanic eruption of ego and fury. He screamed that I was nothing, a fly he could squash, that if he decided to cancel my holiday, I'd just have to sit there like a little girl and take it. And then the golden phrase, the words that sealed his fate. "You leave that senile old fart out of this. You hear me? Senile old fart," referring to Big Boss, his father-in-law, the owner of the company. I almost couldn't believe my luck. It was pure, unadulterated, self-destructive gold. I knew the photos and the recording were powerful, but I wanted more. I needed an airtight case. If he was having an affair, where else was he meeting Naive Girl? His company email. He'd once, in a moment of supreme laziness, given me his password so I could handle his correspondence. His password was Anderlecht, the name of his favorite Belgian soccer team, ironically the biggest rival to my own. The sheer predictability of the man was astounding. On a whim, I tried that same password on his personal email account. Bingo. The idiot used the same password for everything. It was a Pandora's box of deceit, Tinder messages, emails with a woman in the Philippines, and then the motherlode, the entire email exchange with Naive Girl. It had started long before Cinderella was even pregnant. This wasn't a recent fling. It was a calculated long-term affair. I felt like a digital archaeologist unearthing the sordid artifacts of a ruined man. Stalin returned from Switzerland blissfully unaware of the storm brewing. I continued to monitor his emails. Then, on a Wednesday, another gem, an email confirmation for a spa visit for 2 that coming Friday at 3 p.m., followed by a dinner reservation for 2 at a rather upscale restaurant at 6 p.m. Friday. The day he and Naive Girl always disappeared, I had him, checkmate. The time had come to set the final phase in motion. I printed the Facebook photos, Stalin and Naive Girl kissing, skiing, clinking glasses, Stalin posing like a conquering hero in front of a Swiss chalet. I placed them in a plain envelope along with a carefully worded note addressed to Cinderella. It read something like, "We don't know each other, but I believe you deserve to know the truth. Your husband is having an affair. He wasn't in Switzerland visiting an old school friend. He was there with this woman, Naive Girl. Here is her contact information. I don't know if she's aware he's married with a child. He told his boss he was visiting a friend. He told his colleagues he was on a business trip to Prague. Both are lies. He's deceiving everyone. I've accessed your husband's personal email. The password is Anderlecht. Read them for yourself. Pay attention to the latest confirmations. They are meeting at restaurant name at 6 p.m. today, after a visit to spa name at 3 p.m. I am truly sorry to deliver this news. You deserve better than this man." Signed, a concerned observer. I wrestled with this part. Cinderella was innocent. This would destroy her world. But my girlfriend was firm. "If it were you," she said, "cheating on me while I was pregnant, I'd want to know." She needs to know, Mark. She was right. That Friday morning, I called in late to work, a first for me, citing car trouble. Instead, I drove to Stalin and Cinderella's upscale neighborhood. I saw her car in the driveway. She was home with their newborn. Stalin was presumably already at the office, oblivious. I slipped the envelope into their mailbox, rang the doorbell, and walked away quickly, my heart pounding. Back at the office, I composed one last email to Big Boss. I stated that Stalin's constant absenteeism and negligence were making my position untenable, and that I was, with regret, going to resign. Then, the coup de grace. I've also included a voice recording of a recent call from Stalin, made right after you spoke to him in Switzerland. I think you'll find it illuminating. I attached the audio file. Less than 15 minutes later, my company phone rang. It was Big Boss himself. His voice was strained, tight. He was shocked by Stalin's language, his disrespect. He thanked me for my honesty and loyalty, asked me to hold off on my resignation. He would straighten things out. He'll just deny everything, I said, feigning concern, and then he'll take it out on me. No, Big Boss assured me. I'm actually visiting my daughter and grandson this afternoon. I'll swing by the branch before that. It's not far. Ding, ding, ding. Visiting his daughter? The same daughter who by now had likely received my little package of truth? The same daughter whose husband he was about to confront before seeing her? It was almost too perfect. I decided to keep quiet about Stalin's affair and, crucially, about his impending afternoon rendezvous. Let Big Boss walk in and see for himself. At noon, Naive Girl packed her things and left with a cheerful wave. 15 minutes later, Stalin shut down his computer and departed. No goodbye, no explanation. The Emperor had left the building. Around 4 p.m., Big Boss arrived. He looked different, visibly agitated, his face a mask of thunder. My heart hammered against my ribs. Showtime. "Where's Stalin?" he demanded, his voice like gravel. I feigned surprise, channeling my inner Meryl Streep. "Oh? You were coming to see him here?" I must have misunderstood. I assumed you'd spoken to him in Brussels. He's at headquarters every Friday, isn't he? For those important board meetings? Big Boss stared at me, his eyes narrowing. I could almost see the gears whirring, the tumblers clicking into place. "What do you mean?" he asked, his voice dangerously low. "Well," I said, injecting just the right amount of feigned innocence, "he always leaves around noon on Fridays. Says he has standing meetings with you and the board in Brussels. That's what he's always told us." The color drained from Big Boss's face. He pulled out his phone, dialed a number, he stepped away, but I could still hear fragments of his conversation. "No, he's not here. Apparently he went somewhere." A pause. Then, his voice sharper, "Oh, really? I know that place. Okay, I'll come over." He hung up, looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. Was it gratitude? Grim understanding? He simply said, "Thank you, Mark. I'll take care of this. Keep up the good work." And then he was gone, a man on a mission, leaving me in the sudden, deafening silence of the office. The architect of a chaos I couldn't yet see, but could feel crackling in the air. That weekend was the longest of my life. I replayed every moment, every decision, every carefully laid piece of my intricate plan. Had I done enough? Had I done too much? The questions gnawed at me. All I knew for sure was that a bomb had been dropped, and I was waiting for the fallout. Monday morning arrived, heavy with unspoken anticipation. I walked into the office half expecting to see Stalin at his desk, perhaps even more arrogant than before, having somehow wriggled his way out of trouble. But his office was empty. Instead, a man from headquarters, someone I vaguely recognized, was addressing the team. He announced that Stalin wouldn't be in that week, and that he, the temporary replacement, would be overseeing things. A week turned into 2, then a month. Stalin never came back. A new permanent manager was eventually appointed, a decent, competent professional who actually knew the meaning of the word work. Life, slowly, began to return to a semblance of normality. The oppressive atmosphere lifted. People started smiling again. The branch thrived. I eventually got that promotion I'd been denied for so long, moving to a position at headquarters in Brussels. Years passed. The memory of Stalin, though vivid, began to fade into the stuff of office legend. Then, one evening, during a business dinner, I found myself seated next to a long-serving member of the board. I casually mentioned my stint at the branch under Stalin. The board member chuckled, a knowing, conspiratorial sound. "That guy," he said, shaking his head. "Man, let me tell you a story." And he did, unaware that he was speaking to the architect of Stalin's downfall. He filled in all the blanks. He confirmed that Stalin, the golden boy, had indeed gotten his position solely because he was Big Boss's son-in-law. He was being groomed to take over the entire company upon Big Boss's retirement. But then the whispers had started. Rumors of affairs, of gross negligence. Big Boss apparently had been trying to ignore them, blinded by familial loyalty. Until that fateful Friday. According to the board member, Big Boss, armed with the information from his daughter, Cinderella, who had by then opened the envelope and seen the damning evidence, including the restaurant reservation, had gone straight to that upscale establishment. He'd walked in to find Stalin and naive girl, mid-meal, cozy and oblivious. Cinderella, devastated but resolute, had arrived shortly after her father. The scene, as the board member described it with a certain grim relish, was apparently spectacular. A public confrontation, quiet but brutal, humiliation served cold. Oh, to have been a fly on that wall. I'd have given anything. The aftermath was swift and severe. Cinderella filed for divorce, threw Stalin out of their lavish home. Big Boss, wary of legal repercussions from an outright firing, didn't terminate him immediately. Instead, he demoted Stalin, crushing, humiliatingly demoted him to a meaningless dead-end position in a tiny branch in the southernmost part of Belgium, a French-speaking region. Stalin, whose only fluent language was a thick West Flemish dialect so dense even other Dutch speakers struggled with it, was utterly lost. He spoke no French. He had no connections, no power, no one to bully or impress. He was isolated, adrift in a sea of incomprehension. He lasted a few months, then quit, eventually finding work in some low-wage anonymous job. A forgotten man. As for naive girl, she emerged relatively unscathed. She quietly left the company not long after the scandal broke, met someone new, and, as my girlfriend, now ex-girlfriend, though the breakup was amicable, informed me, even got married a year later. We were, strangely enough, invited to the wedding. Life has a funny way of moving on. Big Boss retired a few years later, selling the company for a handsome sum. Without his chosen successor, his legacy took a different turn, but the millions undoubtedly softened the blow. Cinderella, I heard, eventually found happiness, reconnecting with a man she'd dated before Stalin had poisoned her life. And me? I climbed the ladder. I built the career Stalin had tried to sabotage. I even managed to finally take that trip to Greece, several times, in fact, under the auspices of my new reasonable manager. My relationship with that particular girlfriend didn't last, but that's another story for another time. There's a new Miss Metal dude in my life now, one who appreciates good music and, more importantly, good character. Do I feel bad for Stalin? Not one bit. I'm not a vengeful person by nature. I don't revel in the misery of others. But this man was a different breed. A narcissist, a bully, a cheat who derived pleasure from the suffering and belittlement of those he perceived as beneath him. He wasn't just trying to destroy my career. He was poisoning the lives of everyone around him. In my mind, I didn't just seek revenge. I lanced a boil. I exposed a truth that needed to see the light of day. His wife is better off. The company was better off. My colleagues were better off. And yes, I am most certainly better off. It's a strange thing, justice. Sometimes it's loud and bombastic, a courtroom drama unfolding under glaring lights. But sometimes it's a quiet, patient game of chess played in the shadows. Sometimes it's about gathering the forgotten memos, the deleted emails, the whispers in the hallways, and arranging them just so, until the truth reveals itself with undeniable clarity. I didn't fight to gloat or to simply watch him burn, I fought to reclaim what was mine, to restore a small measure of fairness in a world that often seems to lack it. And perhaps in doing so, I offered a quiet lesson that integrity, perseverance, and a refusal to be broken can be powerful weapons. Justice may indeed arrive late, sometimes taking a detour through the darkest alleys of betrayal and despair. But more often than not, if you're patient enough and strategic enough, it always finds its way home.